Patterson Foundation
strengthens people, organizations, and communities by focusing on issues that address mutual aspirations,
foster wide participation, and encourage learning and sharing.
Hello and welcome to Digital Access Discoveries, a podcast by the Digital Access for All initiative by the Patterson Foundation. I'm your host, Read Corley, podcast producer and consultant with the Patterson Foundation. Today we are joined by Bruce Clark, Executive Director of the Center for Digital Equity. And we are thrilled to have Bruce joining us for this podcast. He recently joined us for a webinar titled Building a Digital Equity Ecosystem, Lessons from the Center for Digital Equity. And you can view that webinar by scanning this QR code here. And we'll also talk a little bit more about that in the podcast episode itself. But we are grateful to have him here on this podcast as well because the work of the Center for Digital Equity aligns so closely with the goals of our Digital Access for All initiative. The Center serves as a backbone organization for a collective impact strategy that brings together residents, public and private partners to co-create solutions, ensuring every person has the opportunity to thrive in today's connected world. At TPF, our Digital Access for All initiative explores how multiple sectors can enhance access to technology and foster inclusion and well-being. We know that strengthening digital access, especially among families with limited assets, helps ensure that everyone can benefit from our increasingly online world. This episode also connects to a Suncoast Digital Inclusion Month, which takes place each October across Charlotte, DeSoto, Manatee, and Sarasota counties. The month aligns with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance's Digital Inclusion Week, a nationwide celebration that raises awareness and highlights solutions for prompting digital equity. So whether you're listening from the Suncoast or beyond, we're glad to have you here for a deeper look into how communities are working together to close the digital divide. To listen to the webinar with Bruce, again, you can scan this QR code here. And to learn more about Digital Access for All, you can scan this QR code here. But without further ado, here is my conversation with Bruce Clark. Alrighty, Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today. We last saw you at the Digital Access for All Suncoast Digital Connect webinar titled Building a Digital Equity Ecosystem, Lessons from the Center for Digital Equity. Bruce, we do have a recording of that session, but in a sentence or two, why might someone consider watching that webinar recording if they missed that session earlier this month?
Well, thanks, Reed, for having me. I think one of the reasons would be that there's a lot of chatter and conversations, and rightfully so, about the bits and bytes of digital opportunity work. And I think there's less conversations, at least in my perspective, on the sort of totality and the ecosystem that needs to be developed. And that's really where we spend the bulk of our time together on the webinar. And so if you're really interested in learning more about what it takes to put an ecosystem together, whether that's in a county or a set of counties, this would be, you can be the judge, but this would be a good conversation to come check out.
Yes, absolutely. And so to kind of help set our context for this conversation, what does digital inclusion mean to you? And what does it mean for the Center for Digital Equity at Queen's University, especially as you work towards a collaborative digital equity ecosystem?
I think in stories here, I think about, the people we've served and what they're trying to achieve in their life. And the reality is no one's come to us and said, I want to learn, Excel because I want to learn Excel. It's typically they want to get a better job. They want to improve their life outcomes. And so, that's really what it means to us is how in the world today do you remove barriers to fully participate in our society, economy, and democracy? And the work we do in digital opportunity is critical in this moment in time in the world that we live in, to breaking those barriers down and allowing everyone to thrive.
And I think we're going to get into some more of those stories as well a little bit later in this interview. But before we do, within Digital Access for All's work, we recognize that there are three elements to digital access, which are connectivity, devices, and skills/support. And having all three of these components is critical to digitally connect, learn, and socialize in a meaningful way. And oftentimes this is compared to a three-legged stool, as I believe you talked about in the webinar as well. And you need all three legs of those stools to be completely supported. And an absence of one or more of those elements creates distress and difficulties for individuals and families. And collaboration here at TPF is a key approach for us. In fact, it's one of our 5 C's. We know the Center for Digital Equity at Queen's University is no stranger to collaboration with key partners to ensure that people can connect to our increasingly digital world. But collaboration isn't always easy, and whether someone or an organization is thinking of collaborating to host a device drive or do a tech class or something similar, what are some helpful pieces of advice that you can give as they think about how they can make a difference in their community?
Yeah, I think you hit it in the use of the word collaboration there, sort of as the root of it. So if you're thinking about doing a device drive or any sort of digital opportunity related to skilling class or helping folks sign up for the internet, is the collaboration key, right? Is the key, right? Who in your community is potentially already doing similar work? Who can you learn from? How do you have those conversations? Where does space exist for those conversations to happen? Obviously, there's some great spaces, as we demonstrated in the session we did together, spaces like that where you can show up and learn and learn from the failures of others, and so that you don't have to make the same mistakes. And we did share some of those failures in the session as well, right? So I think it starts with looking around, up, down, left, right, around the corner, across the tracks, put your phrase there, across your community, to understand first and foremost what's happening, and to listen directly from the people that you intend to serve. So if you're thinking about doing a device drive because you think that people in your community need computers, go talk to the people that need computers. Find out what they need. And is the computer their real need? And what kind of computer, frankly? And so I think it starts with collaboration.
Yeah, and that's a great insight. Collaboration isn't just between organizations, it's with the beneficiaries of what it is that you're trying to do. Because if they don't need computers and they need cell phones, then, don't go out and do a computer drive, right? Give them what they need, and that collaboration is necessary to know what they need. And so you shared the value of collaboration in the webinar. Some of the numbers, the impact numbers that you provided there were absolutely astounding. Over 100 plus partnering engaged, 5,000 plus devices distributed, 46,000 skilling hours, and more. But we know those numbers mean more than just what one might think at first glance. What do those numbers mean for those individuals, those beneficiaries who are receiving those devices or receiving those skilling hours, receiving that support? And this is that stories part here. What are some of the stories that you've heard from how these numbers translate into actually benefiting the people of North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about people who can now access a telehealth appointment and who, let's say, I can think of several residents who might have transportation issues or who have expressed that they have transportation challenges, and the ability to go visit their doctor virtually and do it comfortably and understand in a trusting manner how to operate in that environment, not only saves that person time and money, it increases their care and as we'll see in some different data sets, is improving their life outcomes, right? We see the same thing in folks looking for jobs, particularly in the world today, right? The skills required to just navigate the process, let alone the skills required for the job. And so we support a lot of residents across the community in learning the basic skills, the sort of foundational skills to be able to apply for jobs effectively online, and the skills you need to be effective in the job. And so, we've seen folks increase their annual income because they're able to get a better job, because they now have a computer, they've gone through some training, they feel more empowered and equipped. And so I think the last point I'd make on this is these are not independent. It isn't just the skills or the device being provided. It is the digital opportunity combined with the social opportunity that is required in a community. So it's just as important, or, we can debate that, but it is important to not only get the computer and the skills, but also the relationship and the social capital that's developed with those partners.
And that's really powerful, because I feel like a cynic might think like, oh, so they're going to get more scrolling time now that they have a cell phone or something, they'll be on social media. It's like, no, what if they can't make it to their doctor's appointment? They have access to telehealth. They're able to get higher paying jobs and increased education now, and really be able to begin that transition of changing their family and their family tree as well. And, at TPF, we often say that change happens at the speed of trust. And you emphasize something similar during the webinar, saying progress moves at the speed of trust, and trust moves at the speed of relationships. When you think about how the digital equity ecosystem was built in North Carolina, what role did trust and relationships play in moving from the shared aspiration to making it a reality?
Yeah, I mean, trust building is the sausage making of life, really, right? It's the behind the scenes. It's the time before we start this podcast or after, where we ask each other how our families are doing or what's going on in your life. It's the humanness that we bring to it. And so that happens slowly. Sometimes it can happen quickly, but it typically happens slowly over multiple interactions. And coming back to the first question about collaboration and looking around your community and building those relationships, that's where the trust starts. Is a mutual sense of, finding mutual interest, mutual goals, learning about each other, and not just learning about each other from a work context, but like we're all human. We all bring everything to our space. And so getting to understand who we each are individually. And in North Carolina, that was, one of the reasons I think our state is doing as well as it is in this space is because of trust. That space that was created by the state government, frankly, in our Office of Digital Opportunity, to convene partners and to just spend time together and learn from each other. And over those sessions of multiple years, the trust got closer and closer. And so now, when we need to do something, we don't have to build the trust first. We still have to maintain trust. That's not a static thing. It isn't always, you're always required to work on it. But once you sort of have a baseline of trust, then you can get to speed more quickly. We understand each other's intentions. We understand our hearts, our minds, and our money, frankly, and how those things are all pointed in a direction that we can both see. And so we just had time on the clock, so to speak, here in North Carolina, where the space was created for those conversations to happen and evolve. And we've done the same thing here in our community. It's the phrase that sometimes people say is that you pay me for that, you pay me, whatever it is for that hour, but it's only takes me an hour because of the 30 years before that I learned how to do it in an hour. And frankly, here, that's part of the reason is we've spent a lot of time toiling, failing, building trust, losing trust, regaining trust in order to be at a place we are today.
Yeah. I mean, such a good insight. And like you said, you guys now have this baseline level of trust with your communities. How long did it take for you guys to reach this? Because this was not an overnight thing.
No, I mean, I would say, in our context, it was probably between year 5 and year 8 where I felt like we had, there was some insert the pandemic, which tested that trust because we had to move very quickly and we were all impacted. But the 5 previous years or 8 previous years, give or take that range, where, pre-pandemic, where we were really involved in this work, created the momentum that when the pandemic hit and we sort of went into crisis response mode, we had some foundational trust. And so, there were milestones along the way. It wasn't like no trust to trust, sort of a light switch. It was a gradient that went, up each year, each day, each interaction, each coffee, each text of, hey, how you doing today? What's going on in your world? That adds to the trust.
Mm-hmm. And at this point in the conversation, I think it would be helpful to share a bit about the Center for Digital Equity's sustainability formula, and we'll break these parts down for the audience here. It's mindset plus support network plus infrastructure equals sustainability. And so, Bruce, let's break that down. Let's start with the mindset. And I believe leadership is informed, aware, and engaged in digital equity within their conversations. What does it look like to have a leadership that is informed, aware, and engaged?
It's similar to trust in that sense that it sets the table, right? So if leaders in your community, or frankly in our community, I just presented a couple of weeks ago to the CEOs of all the major companies here in Charlotte, and so those folks at varying degrees are sort of tuned in. They have a mindset. They understand what the problem is, or better yet, they understand the opportunity if we're successful. That we're going to have more people who can take the jobs that they're trying to get filled. We have more people who can access healthcare and live healthier lives. These things actually reduce the cost on our taxpayers and on our companies to be able to do what they need to do. So mindset is a foundational thing that we really seek across a community. How do leaders, and you define leaders how you want, grassroots leaders, business leaders, civic leaders, are they aware of and do they understand this digital opportunity landscape?
And then support networks is the next part of that formula, and that is formal and informal groups that are aware of and connected to digital equity resources and services through digital navigators. Can you just give us a couple examples of what formal and informal groups exist in your ecosystem that might help our listeners think about who they can think about in their community that might be worth engaging?
Yeah, clubs are one. So thinking about neighborhood groups, clubs and organizations, things that have nothing to do with technology, right? So there might be a knitting club, or a mahjong is really popular these days, right? Folks get together to play mahjong, and so those are places where there's trust built in. And if someone comes into that network, into that club or group, and shares a resource, that resource is then sort of gets the trust that group has and allows it to sort of spread more quickly, allows that information to flow so that folks are empowered. And so those are the kind of groups. Church groups are really a key, particularly in our community, civic groups, neighborhood groups, to name a few.
And then the final part of this addition side of the equation is infrastructure, and that's the back office administration that's required to bring both public, private, and resident partners together to organize and focus their collective efforts to align with these co-created objectives. So this is a big one. Let's break it down to what might be a laundry list of things that are needed in terms of back office administration to get an ecosystem not just up and running, but thriving, and in what we like to call TPF excellence. It's not perfection, but we're ensuring responsibility and intentionality and joyful stewardship are present. So what are some things that might be needed to get an ecosystem up and running in terms of infrastructure?
Yeah, I think the number one question to ask that sort of starts all of the things that you just laid out and the potentials here is sort of a two-parter, which is who in your community is charged with waking up every day to think about this issue? And the second part of that question is, and are they funded to wake up every day to think about this issue? And the communities that can answer that question, to me, that is the ticket to the game. That is table stakes. You've got to have an organization, and better yet, an individual, but an organization whose job it is to help convene and bring the elements of an ecosystem together. And so that's so critical, right? That is the reason that was the vision for our existence, was to create that centralized space while also recognizing that it is not a single organization's responsibility. And this is a tightrope to walk. In most communities, if you think about an issue and you think about an organization, oftentimes it's like, oh yeah, that's the thing that they're working on, that they're leading, and so I don't need to do that. That's not the case in this work. It is the organization who can help bring the people together, but that the collective work across the hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations in your region all have a critical role to play. But someone has to send the email. Someone has to put the calendar invite out there. Someone has to share the notes. Someone has to drive the momentum and, frankly, be the bellwether for the trust indicator that creates the space for trust to be built.
And I like that you went back to collaboration there as well. We've been talking about that a lot, and it came up again. So now we're getting to the equal signs of this equation. We've got mindset plus support networks plus infrastructure equals sustainability. And sustainability is measured by digital equity and digital inclusion showing up in strategic planning amongst public, private, and resident-focused organizations. And I know during the webinar you shared you don't love the word sustainability, but describe the end goal that is trying to be achieved with this sustainability piece.
Yeah, I think there's a phrase that most folks know, and if not, I'll make sure to describe it too. But it's sort of follow the money, right? And so if you're thinking about an issue, any issue, and you're wondering what's happening, where's it, who's doing what, you can look at activities, but oftentimes it's really important to look at where's the investment going, where is the money going in this issue, or to solve the thing you're talking about. And so oftentimes, in a majority of the time, that money is rooted in some kind of strategic plan from an organization or a vision that's set out. Most organizations who thrive and are successful, operate on a planning. They plan their work. They think about it. They're diligent, and they have things to measure their progress. And so for us, sustainability, the part I don't like about this sort of abstract sense of foreverness, that's just really hard to know, right? But what isn't hard to know, what is clear is, does digital opportunity, does digital inclusion, is it in the annual city's budget or plan? Is it in the county's annual plan? Is it in your major philanthropic organizations when they're talking about what they're going to do? Does this work show up? Does digital skilling show up? Does access to the internet show up? Does device refurbishment and the device ecosystem show up? Does digital navigator services show up? And so first, it's a focus on understanding the plans, where they are of key organizations, reviewing them to see if it shows up. And if not, then you have to come back to the first part of the equation with mindset and say, okay, how do I go to the leaders of those organizations and understand their mindset and help shift their mindset so that when those planning processes start and they're thinking about other community issues, say housing or workforce development, they understand the intersectionality of digital opportunity. It is included in the plans, and that's the pathway to funding, which is ultimately what the sustainability question seeks to answer is, how do we resource these organizations to go do this work?
And I like that, because that is a clear measure of success. If this is being implemented into other organizations' strategic plans or city or county funding, it's very clear measure of success. So whether someone is new to this work or has been working in this space for years, it can be easy to be overwhelmed by how much there needs to be done. How many more people are in need of digital access? But as we wrap up this conversation, I'd like us to shrink things down, smallify things for our listeners to take back to their organizations, their communities. Bruce, if I were an organization, what is one piece of advice you would give me on how to get involved in the digital access space?
Well, I think, not to be a broken record here, but maybe to bookend our conversation is look up and out, right? Or frankly, look within first and then look up and out, right? What's happening within your own organization? Are the people who are around you digitally included, right? If you're a company or a government agency, what internal things can you do? And at the same time, sort of look up and out to see is there someone in my community who is charged with doing this work every day, who is, coming back to the, to the rooting in the infrastructure conversation, and talk to them, share and learn from them and the community of practice. And so, that's, I think not any sort of rocket science or truly inspiring wisdom here. It's more the basics that matter, right? And in that case, it's the beginning of the trust building. If you're thinking about starting a program, is get in the arena, and these are the pathways to get in the arena.
Yes, and I like you bringing it back around, bookending the conversation, and I appreciate it because repetition is persuasive. So we do need to keep saying this. You might feel like a broken record, but that, eventually it will get out there. So, and then now think of me. I'm just an individual in my community, right? What's one piece of advice on how you would give the layperson, just community members, on how to get involved in this digital access space?
Wow, there's a lot of different ways one could get involved depending upon their interest and their expertise and their passion. And so I'll give two. I think one would be, I think digital navigation services are critical to any digital opportunity ecosystem. I think they're foundational and fundamental. And so in that, I would find a way to volunteer alongside a digital navigator. That to me would be number one, assuming that those opportunities exist. And if they don't exist, I would encourage leverage the digital navigator ecosystem in your region to create volunteer opportunities. That's a great way to bring folks along. They oftentimes, there's a sense of understanding of the issue from an individual perspective, but from a lived experience, when you're with the digital navigator, you can see and feel the impact, and it will better situate your role. The second way is sort of on the other side of the equation, is that there's so sort of on the civic lens or the government lens, is making sure your voice is heard, making sure you understand what issues impact this digital opportunity space, whether that's in a policy lens or in a city council or a county commission or whatever the governmental structure is just making your voice heard. And a combination of those two things are sort of the levers that we push to drive this work forward. The conversation with your city council person helps shift mindset. That can lead to things on the sustainability side, right? And so even you as an individual, you have power in that equation to go deploy. And it starts with those two things that I suggested. Become a volunteer with a digital navigator, or call or send an email to your city council person or your county commissioner or your congressional rep, frankly, that just shares your interest and your desire to see these issues supported and moved forward.
Absolutely. And I really like that advice to get involved with the digital navigator, volunteer with them, because when you see the work in person, that is really, what tugs at your heartstrings, what really helps put it home in any organization, in any volunteering capacity. I feel like when you actually get to see the beneficiaries of the work, that's really powerful. So Bruce, as we wind down here today, is there anything else that we haven't talked about or highlighted that you'd like to?
Well, I think it's very important, and I wish I would have started with this, so thank you for the opportunity. I think it's very important to recognize and acknowledge and celebrate all of the work that you all have already done. And so, yes, in a context, when you talk about building, there's almost a sense of you're behind or you haven't done something, and that's not the case. So just acknowledging all the work that TPF has put in and all your partners and all the work on the ground, you all are already doing amazing things. And it's a constant learning. It's the agile mindset to continue to grow. And so both in the conversation we had that's share out in this conversation is acknowledging that, celebrating it, and encouraging you to continue to keep going in that way.
Well, Bruce, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining us for the webinar as well. So everybody go check out that webinar as well. Bruce, thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Digital Access Discoveries podcast. To learn more about this initiative or the Patterson Foundation, please go to thepattersonfoundation.org.